Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
I have discovered just a few things over the past 2.5 years of hosting a YouTube channel, and probably the biggest lesson I've ever learned here is you cannot be in a pleasing everyone business. You know, I just posted a series of videos with Matt Dillahunty of the Atheist Experience, who is getting married today, by the way, and congratulations out to Matt. It's going to be an awesome wedding. Aaron Ra is conducting the ceremony. How cool is that? 2 atheist YouTube heavy hitters at a wedding? That's going to be a great day. And congratulations out to Matt, who I consider a friend. Is just a terrific guy. And if you haven't seen the segments that we posted on the YouTube page, he's just got a lot of good stuff to say. And it was nice to hear him, instead of just talking to speaking to specific caller questions like he does on the Atheist Experience. It was a chance to hear him talk personally about himself a little bit, his background, where he came from. You know, he was a believer. He was going to be a pastor. He used to have a horrible fear of public speaking. He went into the Navy. I mean, all these things that I never knew until we sat down and chatted about. And he talks a lot about the show, how he got involved and sort of grew into the host position. And those are all on my YouTube page, and they're ready to go if you want to take a look at them. But congratulations out to Matt. You know, Matt's style is different than my style. Mine is different than yours. Anytime I post a video, you can just watch the comments section. Oh, I love it. Oh, it's too long. Oh, it's too short. More podcast, more videos, more cartoons. You suck. Great voice, terrible voice. You're stupid. You're brilliant. Just a schizophrenic avalanche of wild opinions, which unfortunately is a byproduct of the internet. Everybody with a computer keyboard and an internet connection has an opinion. If you let that stuff guide you too much, you will go crazy. I like to sort of browse the comments to get the general vibe, right? Just to get a kind of a big picture. How is it being received? How are people reacting? But I'll tell you, I feel horrible for anybody who would be trapped into going comment by comment and taking all that stuff personally. You'd never sleep. You will not please everybody. And that speaks to style. Some people I've got just a real everyman kind of a style. I like to laugh. I'm not an angry guy. I mean, I have my moments, but anger doesn't define me. And I talk about how those who are often antagonistic for the atheist cause sometimes frustrate me. Sometimes they do great work and help to draw a big circle around things, and sometimes they're just douchebags, you know, and that frustrates me. Some people say my mocking style is inappropriate, disrespectful, counterproductive, and some people say it's not mocking enough. I should take it a level further. Am I not a true believer? And you probably won't find many people more opposite than me and my first guest, Mike Lee, who calls himself the Religious Antagonist. And he has a YouTube page, and he is brassy, and he likes to stir the pot, and he likes to go out and really get people's blood up, often for a laugh. And I found his channel to be very entertaining, sometimes brilliant, sometimes juvenile, just a wild mix of stuff. And we spoke a couple of days ago. Now, you don't just say you are a religious antagonist. You are the Religious Antagonist. I mean, that's your moniker, that's your brand, that's your YouTube page. You just wear it on your sleeve, right? You're proud to go out there and stir the pot. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I don't believe in false advertising at all. You know, I think antagonizing religion, it's important as well as entertaining, and it's fun. Or I wouldn't continue to do it.
Do you come from religion, though? I mean, are you a lifelong atheist, or did you come from some sort of indoctrination? Where's the fire in your belly come from?
I was raised religious. I never actually drank that Kool-Aid, so to speak. I never really considered myself a believer. Just, you know, growing up in that kind of environment, you know, a fundamentalist religious environment. I mean, you know, if that doesn't put you on the offensive when it comes to religion, I don't know what will.
Well, I take a lot of heat for mocking the doctrine, and I love going after the belief system that I used to have to walk on eggshells around. For me, I don't know about you, but for me, it's just liberating. You make a video with Jesus and he's brandishing an Uzi. I mean, it used to be, well, you don't make fun of Jesus. And of course now it's like, screw it, I mean, it's liberating to be able to mock what is really essentially mock worthy. But
absolutely.
You take it a step further. I mean, you go after the people.
Yeah, and that's, there's a fine line between taste, and obviously to some people what I've done in some of my videos has certainly crossed that line. I mean, am I making atheists and the secular movement look like assholes, or am I liberating people and giving them the opportunity to look, support, and view something that they normally wouldn't, in polite society have the opportunity to do? And that's a really fine line, and it's different for different people.
Well, for those who have not yet, and I'm sure they will, visit your YouTube page, give me a description. What kind of stuff do you do? What kind of videos have you posted? If someone was to visit your page right now, what are we talking about?
Sure. Well, what I do is satire, and most of it is based in religion, although at some point I'd like to branch out more into politics and, women's issues and gay rights. But at this point, I'm more focused on religion. What I do is I go out and I criticize religious beliefs, sometimes religious believers. I go out and I challenge the faith of people that consider themselves religious, whether they're, Mormon, Christian, Catholic. I really try to go out there and really capture in a real sense the same way that Michael Moore would, or the way that Borat or Ali G, any of those guys would.
Don't compare yourself to Michael Moore. You're better than
I'm a big fan. I love that guy.
Oh, you got to be shitting me. Michael Moore?
Yeah, absolutely.
The bar a little higher for yourself. So where do you go? Do you wait outside church doors, or do you go to rallies? Do you go to revivals? Where do you go to accost people and challenge their beliefs?
I go anywhere that won't get me arrested.
And the response you get is what? Do they know it's satire, or do you position yourself as a believer, or do you just get in their face and say, I'm an atheist?
I really think it's important in my videos to not say that I'm an atheist or I'm taking any particular side. What I do is I just challenge belief. I'm not there to say what's right. What I try to say is what's wrong, and try to point that out and try to make light of things that we've held dear to our society and theology, things like that. I mean, it's not worth taking seriously. And in fact, it's hilarious.
Well, and the response is what? I mean, do they get freaked out? Do they actually engage? What do you get?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the situation. I mean, I've teased Mormons before. I've teased street preachers. The response is varied. I mean, it just depends on how the person reacts, and you also have to. I mean, in my position, I have to be careful to. I don't want to get shot at some point. So, you've got to kind of read people and understand how far is too far, and get what you're looking for, which is that honest gut reaction from a religious person when they're being challenged.
Well, let's just roll through some video titles. I mean, you've got Put the Bible in the Fiction section. Is that Christian versus Atheist Kickball? You've got Jesus versus the Easter Bunny. Mormons, the other white meat, which is a great title. And you just did a piece with Thunderfoot. Tell me about that.
Right. Yeah. Well, Thunderfoot, he took a few months off and was kind of traveling the country, and just by luck I happened to get in touch with him, and he happened to be coming through my area, so we were able to collaborate on a video. And, it was like, man, you really look like Jesus in real life. Let's work with this, So the idea was to do a video in my style with Thunderfoot in it. So we dressed him up like Jesus and decided if Jesus was to really come back, to America, which I don't think he really ever probably even existed, but, let's say he did. He's coming back to America for his second return, or for the return. What would he want to do? He'd want to get attention, right? And the only way to do that in today's society is to go bigger, go better than what he did the first time. We would have to do another crucifixion, right? And where do you get a cross? Home Depot.
So you and Jesus go to Home Depot? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, Jesus and I go to Home Depot and we go cross shopping, and it lasts about a minute and a half before we're thrown out.
All right, is that on your page?
It's still pretty funny. It's on Thunderfoot's channel.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. How do you do on camera? I mean, to me, it seems like such a kind of a cerebral type, who sits behind the computer monitor. You got him out in public. How'd he do when he received sunlight? Did he do all right?
He didn't melt away. Okay. If that's what you're asking. No, Thunderfoot was amazing to work with. He's a great actor. I was really concerned that he wasn't going to be able to handle stressful situations in front of people that weren't getting the joke or didn't find humor in it. But he is very intelligent as well. I will go on the record and say he's the smartest person I've ever met. I mean, we had some times we were able to talk a little bit, in between shoots, and we filmed a little bit of other footage as well. So those videos will probably be out a little later. But what an incredible guy! I mean, this guy, he's got it.
He's a great guy. Figure. I mean, people either love him or hate him, but I just have come to really admire his work. He was a tremendous inspiration to me as I made the turn from belief to non-belief. His arguments made sense. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't screaming at the webcam,
Right.
He put the puzzle pieces together and said, look, do the math, and then the onus was on me to take it the next step and try to, find out for myself. And I respect that about him. I really do.
Yeah. I think every movement kind of needs that. I mean, every movement needs somebody who's a little more patient, somebody who's a little more aggressive. Different people respond to different ways, and maybe my way is a little more juvenile than other people's, and some people may not get it. But if it's connecting and if it's furthering the movement the way that we want it to go, is that a bad thing? I mean, is there really a bad reason to get involved and to get active? I don't believe so. I was going to do,
being a guy who did Christian radio for 12 years, I was going to do a piece on Christian music, having seen it from behind the scenes, and you've already done it. I mean, it's why I haven't touched it, is because I was thinking, well, we could talk about Sandy Patty, we could talk about Michael English, we could talk about Ray Boltz, we could talk about all these different stories, and I was there when they happened. But I watched your channel, and you actually got the Christian Music Hall of Shame, a video which addresses these people who were set out, as examples, good Christian examples, and their lives were just as screwed up as anybody else. And
exactly.
You were pretty harsh.
Yeah, well, ironically, when I was raised religious, I was only allowed to listen to Christian music, so it's people like you that I grew up listening to, so I forgive you. Well, and the Christian artists, I guess the point of that video, and speaking to somebody who's involved in that industry, it is an industry, and that to me is the problem. I mean, I've always kind of had this issue. I mean, although I listened to it as a kid, because that's all I was allowed to listen to, it's like, how does a Christian rock star really justify what they're doing every day? I mean, they wake up, they buy $100 rock star pants and, $30,000 light show for their tour. Shouldn't that money go somewhere else? I mean, I get that a regular rock star, he would do that because, it's all about his ego and all about inflating who he is. But a Christian rock star, he's supposed to be glorifying God.
Well, what they believe, and many truly believe, they are called to the ministry, and instead of being a pulpit preacher, they are called to use, quote-unquote, their gifts, which means they believe they are supposed to go out and be a professional musician. Now, there's no way to qualify how many people are truly convinced. They've totally convinced themselves that. I have no idea who's real, who's not, who's bogus, who's not, but you did draw out one example after another of people who have really shown that it ain't all it's cracked up to be. The only real challenge I had with you is there was a band in the early 80s, Whiteheart, their lead singer, Scott Douglas, and I saw that concert live. I saw it live right before he was arrested. The lead singer of Whiteheart was Scott Douglas, arrested for raping children, right? It was like like an 11, 13-year-old kid, something like that?
Yep, something like that, yep.
The industry's rocked, and the band is like, oh, what do we do? They fire the guy, obviously. I think he did 10 years. He did some prison time.
Sure. Yeah, he's a registered sex offender now. I mean, in my video, I put his address and his picture now, just in case anyone lives by him.
Registered sex offender. What I didn't agree with, though, is I don't know how it helps us to have his home address up there. I mean, part of me's thinking, I totally get that he needs to be on the radar of anybody in his neighborhood.
And I think this goes back to the tone question. I mean, is it okay to publish their address? I mean, it's public information, it's public knowledge. I mean, I'm certainly not encouraging anyone to do anything illegal. I don't think they should be harassed.
I mean, it's not just him, it's whoever happens to be at his house, answering his phone. Does he have kids?
Sure.
Those are the concerns that I have.
Right, right.
And that's where
those are genuine, absolutely.
I don't want to bring up too much in the way of politics because I think you and I stand apart.
Okay.
You crashed a Tea Party event, and I was thinking to myself, this guy's got balls of titanium. He's dressed up in this patriotic This red and white and blue deal with the powder puff wig, and you crashed a Tea Party event. Can you just kind of describe what you did?
Yeah, well, I dressed up, as you said, in a patriotic outfit. I mean, most people mistook me for George Washington and thought I was there to celebrate their Tea Party rally. Luckily, the Tea Party rally wasn't very well attended. I mean, there was probably 100 or so people. So they thought I was one of them. They invited me up on stage to kind of speak to them. So I went up on stage and kind of prodded him a little bit, kind of poked him, kind of made fun of him a little bit, and then kind of walked through the crowd a little bit, kind of shook some hands, met some people, and then I came back a few minutes later with a man dressed like a slave, a black guy dressed like a slave in chains, and walked through the middle of the rally with a bullhorn saying, "Yes, we can. Yes, we can. The only way that America can become an economic powerhouse is to bring back slavery." I really think that's what they want. I just, it doesn't make any sense to cut all these social programs and make money.
Bring back slavery.
Maybe it's an oversimplification, but it just...
No, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I have more than my share of qualms with the Tea Party. On some level, let me just say this out loud and open the floodgates of hate and death. But on a very basic level, not what it is now, on a basic level, I get the Tea Party. I get the fact that people don't feel like they're being listened to. They don't feel like that they have any control. They feel like their public servants are spending and living lascivious lifestyles and jet setting across the country and enjoying $100,000 a plate dinners and playing golf 30 times a year. And this is their way of saying, I want to take this country back. I want a say. I want to be listened to by my elected representatives. That part I get. I really do. What I don't get, obviously, is the fact that it seems to have turned into this big pulpit.
Right.
I don't think they want slavery. I do think they are highly uneducated about the origins of the country, what their own founding fathers did and what they believed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, do they inherently want slavery back? I don't know. It seemed to make sense because it seems to be predominantly white people involved, people that want money to come from nowhere. These are people that, once again, I'm going to make another judgmental statement, but, I've seen all these pictures and I've seen these rallies where, these are people that are on Medicare or Social Security, they're older folks or sick people, and they don't want the government to give handouts to, for instance, illegal immigrants, but they're willing to take that handout from them because, we're white and we're American and we deserve that, but we shouldn't give a handout to anyone else. So it just seemed to, I was able to rationalize it as I was writing it and thinking, this would be really funny.
I tend to think that the Occupy Wall Street crowd is as guilty as anyone of expecting the handout within the Tea Party. I mean, do they see Sarah Palin and get all misty-eyed? And I'm like, oh, God, you're killing me. Do they talk about what a godly man Rick Perry is? Yes, and it makes me want to just shoot myself in the head. I get that. I understand that. Where they do talk a lot about how this is a Christian nation, we were founded on the Bible, and they have no idea. But most of the people that I know who are involved, they're hardworking people with a good heart who, quite frankly, are just frustrated, and they just want to be heard because they feel like that now it's just gone off the rails.
The issue with politics is so convoluted. I mean, it's really hard to look at it and say this is the problem because it's not black and white. I mean, everything is domino affected. It relies on something else. I mean, it's very easy for somebody, in the Tea Party movement or the Occupy Wall Street, to say, it's big business, it's corporations. Well, sure, it seems to be that on the surface, but there's so much more going on that we have no idea about. I don't propose to know. I'm not an economist. I don't know how to fix America. If I did, I would be doing it. I don't. So I stick to what I do know, which is religion is bad.
Do you have any convictions? Do you have a belief system? I mean, if you had to sum it up for Reader's Digest, what are you about?
When I think of religion and when I think of the world, I don't propose to have all of the answers. I just know that what I've seen in my experiences and what I've seen with religion, the way that I was raised, and I've seen what it's done to our society with issues, women's issues, gay rights issues, even science studies, things like that. I mean, these are all the talking points of how religion is dangerous. But inherently, faith is stupid. And these are the things that motivate me and that keep me fired up is that, I have an opportunity. I have a chance right now to say something. I'm a white male, and I know, that gives me privilege, according to some people, and I'm going to use that. I'm not really into the whole family, kids thing, This is my legacy. This is what I want to do with my life, and I'm doing it. And, for better or worse, some people don't get it. Some people do. If they understand, if I'm empowering them, if I'm encouraging them to get active, then it was worth it.
Has anybody ever said, after our encounter, I actually did some research or some homework, and now I think differently. Have you seen some fruit?
Yeah, I have. Especially my God verse $20 video, which is the video where I approach a homeless man and ask him if he's willing to cross the God from his sign that says God bless, if he's willing to trade that God for $20, trade a sign. And that video was pretty controversial when it first came out. It came out earlier this year, and I got a lot of responses, a lot of negative, saying I was exploiting the family and their situation. But I got a lot of private messages from people that said that, they were these fence sitters that saw how faith and how religion and dogma got in the way of a common sense decision. I mean, within reason, I can't think of anything I wouldn't trade for $20.
Anything on the burner here for the next 6 months, or you want to keep it under wraps and surprise everybody? Anything we should be looking forward to on the Religious Antagonist channel?
Yeah, well, Thunderfoot and I, we worked on a couple other videos while he was in town, so those will be coming out on his channel. And, I did a video with Healthy Addict, Ashley Paramore is her name, and that'll be coming out on my channel here in the next month or so. Got some really good videos. I got some really good footage through the summer, and I'm still filming some stuff. So I'm just looking to diversify and grow what I do and get better at what I'm doing and just promote the scene.
That was a conversation we had a couple of days ago. I was implementing some new Skype recording equipment, and I can listen back, and I'm just horrified at the fidelity of my side was not better. And it's fixed. So anyway, thanks for being patient with me. Religious Antagonist is what you want to type into a YouTube search engine if you want to see his page, and it's worth checking out. One thing I really do like about Mike's productions is that they're really good. They're really clean. YouTube is quantity. It's lots and lots and lots of stuff. But to find something that's written out and properly lit and blocked and framed and it's nice to see that level of production, and he does a terrific job. And love him or hate him, you should definitely check out his YouTube page, Religious Antagonist. Let's go to the phones. We're talking about tactics when it comes to promoting atheism or free thought, science skepticism, or just speaking out against religion. I've got Kyle. Kyle, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's up?
Not too much. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
Big fan of you and Mike. What was that?
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad you called in. Thank you for the kind words, too. What's your take on all this?
Well, as far as tactics go and everything like that, I kind of have to – I'm not sure how you feel about Sam Harris's opinion on, maybe treating our congressmen and such that speak of God told me this, God told me that, like they just spoke of Poseidon or Elvis still being alive. I kind of have to agree that the best way not only or to get rid of these kind of beliefs in our society is not only to laugh at them, as Sam Harris suggested, but just point them out, to criticize them, to get people to think I think that's what I most agree with Mike on his philosophy as far as what he's doing.
I find a weird sort of a boundary where I love to make fun of the dogma and the doctrine. The Bible's a huge target. I mean, it's so easy, right?
Yeah.
But when you go up to someone who believes in the Bible, I don't think it's productive to say, you're an idiot, I mock you, I laugh at you, I normally try to take a less direct approach and say, I find the stories that you believe to be laughable, to be unbelievable, to be against science, reason, and common sense. They still get insulted quite often, but when you walk in on the offense, are you really doing any good? Is anybody actually listening? I really can't speak to that.
Even taking a passive stance, though, I've been rather disappointed. I always kind of thought that, if you made somebody really criticize the way I did, I guess I never really had that kind of belief, though. But when you point out factual, just like God can't be omnipotent, can God create a rock so big he can't lift it? Well, then omnipotence can't really work out. Like, how does that not factor? And it doesn't most times. Like in any conversation, it breaks my heart. It really does when I try not to take the offensive, but
well, I think the offensive can be good. I mean, I'm not trying to play both sides here, but it's a difficult fence to straddle sometimes. You want to go in and you want to be received, and you don't want to automatically get people's walls up. At the same time, I think it is healthy to ridicule what is essentially ridiculous, right? I mean, you mentioned a great example, you know, the cliche, can God make a rock so big? The one that gets me is you always say, hey, can God do anything? Oh, you betcha. Is God omnipotent? He is omnipotent. There's nothing he can't do. There is nothing that my God can't do. Amen. And then my next question is always, well, then why didn't he just forgive all of our sins? Why did he have to send his son to live 33 years to be then tortured to death and then raised from the dead and then coming back? Why not just forgive us? Well, he could have, but there had to be a sacrifice. Well, wait a minute. God's omnipotent, right? He can do anything. Amen. But why didn't he just forgive us? And then they start to, I mean, honestly, you're mocking, you're drawing a big circle around it. But also at the same time, you didn't start out with, you are a blathering idiot for believing what you believe. So what works for you? I mean, you walk into a room and somebody says, I believe the Bible. What's the first thing you say?
Well, I think I'm kind of at an advantage in that aspect. I live in upstate New York. You know, most people are already convinced. I run into maybe a handful of creationists, and those are the ones that really depress you. It seems like no level of cognitive dissonance is too much. You know, you can point out any number of things, like you say, well, why is sacrifice necessary? Well, you know, it's okay because Jesus was semi-divine and he volunteered for it. And it's like, well, why is a volunteered scapegoat better than any other kind of scapegoat? And, well, you know, it's just, we don't have to understand it. It's like,
You know, I did a show, I was a guest on the God Discussion podcast. It was 3 long hours earlier this week, and they had a couple of apologists. There was like a very hardcore conservative Bible-believing apologist, and then there was another guy who had written a book saying that he had visited hell, and there were 30 torments, and he was sent back to tell the rest of us about it. Well, you know, I found myself, I was antagonizing a little bit. I mean, I would jump in and issue direct challenge, and there was some mockery of the dogma and doctrine in that challenge. But at the end of that 3-hour conversation, I honestly feel like I could have sat down and had a beer with anybody that was part of the show, you know. How do you do that? I don't know.
See, I enjoy the intellectual, almost apologist, you know. They, as infuriating as they can be, I almost enjoy them. I've had professors like that, and you can actually have a discussion with them, although they won't back down on anything. You can have a fruitful discussion. It's just I hesitate to say, the part of the flock. The part of the flock has no interest in conceding any points, no real interest in debate or really thinking about the issue.
Yeah.
Which I don't understand why you would start an argument or start a debate if you're just not, like my thing is, I want to think about it. You know, I'm completely okay with considering any point. And one big question I like to ask is, would any amount of evidence be enough to change your mind and your faith? And
well, many people will just tell you, they'll say, I don't care what evidence you present. I don't care what you say. I will never reject my God. Well, there's not much you can do with that God.
Your beliefs.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you listening and participating in the show and keep arguing out there, okay?
Thanks for having me, and that's what I do best.
All right, take care, Kyle. By the way, we will be talking with Dave Silverman of American Atheists later in the show. Some big stuff they got going on for March of 2012, the single biggest event, non-belief, reason, science, atheist, agnostic, whatever event ever is coming up in 2012. And so he's going to bring the details, and we'll talk to him about tactics, what works, what doesn't. Jeremy in Pennsylvania, thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's up?
Thank you, Seth. And by the way, you're amazing.
Oh, well, you're very kind. I'm just a guy with a deep voice and expensive toys. I am, man. But I appreciate it very much. What's your take on all of this?
Well, I think, we are outnumbered. The atheist community is heavily outnumbered by just the religion. I don't even mean Christianity. Any religious organization will outnumber us. And we have, crazies like the Westboro Baptist Church that need to be, I think those are the ones we need to really start, like, hey, they're reading the same Bible as every other Christian. They're just taking it a little different way. How is it that all these words can be misinterpreted and that only yours is right? And I think that's something we really need to challenge Christians, Muslims, everyone with. Like, how is it there's so many different interpretations of the same exact words.
Well, if we're going to be fair, the mainstream Christian church protests the Westboro crowd just as much as everybody else, and I commend them for doing so. They essentially will go to the rallies and stand against these Westboro nut jobs, but they're all sort of taking their own truth from the same Bible. Who was it who had the quote that said, it's at the tip of my tongue, was it Susan B. Anthony, who said something about how when someone hears God's voice or God's will, it somehow coincidentally always lines up with their own. It's just kind of a weird coincidence like that, you know?
Yeah.
But you know, how Westboro has continued to be not relevant, but to continue to get headlines boggles my mind. There's not very many of them. And everybody I know looks at them with a raised eyebrow and says, you know, wow, credibility zero. I mean, they're just a waste of time, but they have to stand against them, picket against them, to protest against them, because if not, they'll go unchecked. It's a weird catch-22.
Well, I think, honestly, because before they were protesting the soldiers' death, they didn't get any news coverage, or what they did was very, obscure. And that when the war started, and after 9/11, they started getting a lot more press, and that's actually when they started becoming a real threat. Before that, they were just protesting homosexual suicides, people who died from AIDS, and I think that's horrible, but I don't think they should get any press at all. No one should even acknowledge their existence and just let them die off. But my bringing them up was more for, it's the same Bible. It's the same. They're not, it's not like they're reading something completely different. It's the same word. And, I've had debates with my family and my grandmother after my grandfather passed away. She thought me saying I was atheist meant I read tarot cards and I worshiped the devil. Yeah. She's like, I went through exactly what you went through when I was younger, and I was reading tarot cards. I'm like, Grandma, I don't believe in that. They're just cards, and you can take whatever meaning you want from them, and you're just associated with something that's going to or has happened.
Oh, I'm amazed at how many people will hear the word atheist and say, so you're a Satan worshiper? And you literally look around and go, wait, what? Well, no, I don't believe in Satan. By the way, the Susan B. Anthony quote was found by some folks in the chat room, and thank you. It says, quote, I distrust those people who know so well what God wants them to do, because I noticed it always coincides with their own desires. Well, I think, honestly, stupidity must be stood against and must be exposed. And there's a lot of, as Michael Shermer would say, since he's a debunker, there's a lot of bunk out there. And you got to do what you can to draw a circle around it and make sure it is exposed. I appreciate the call from Pennsylvania, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you very much for having me.
I've got a full switchboard. 937, thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's your name?
It's Brian. How you doing?
Brian, glad you're listening. What do you have for us today?
Well, it's a little off topic, but I wanted to thank you for the Halloween history thing you did a little bit ago. I'm the guy who called during the Bats and the Belfry show, and we got on that whole origins of Halloween. So,
well, for those listening after the fact, if you're listening to a later YouTube and it is later in the year, this is the eve of Halloween. It is right before October 31st, so everybody's in Halloween mode. And I don't know about you, Brian, but this is my favorite holiday. I love this time of year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, taking the little boy trick-or-treating tomorrow. I'm going to wear him out. We're going to go all over the neighborhood.
What are you dressing him up as?
He is going to be Mario from the Super Mario Brothers. He's going through a whole Mario phase right now. We got the little mustache and everything.
How is Mario still popular? What, 3 decades now? That's crazy.
He's massive. My son builds him out of Legos. He's got little toy. He's 6 years old. He's got little stuffed Marios. And he doesn't even play video games. We don't have anything like that. He just loves Mario.
Well, when you go out and debate and speak with people about religion, about the idiocy of it all, Are you on the offense? Are you an antagonist? Do you fit the profile?
You know, it really depends. I mean, if somebody's interested in like a real exchange of ideas and I feel like they're actually going to listen to what I have to say, then I'll have a really thoughtful discussion and I'll try to look at things from both sides. But a lot of times it's just somebody who they're not going to hear a word you say. They're just going to keep quoting scripture or, you know, coming to the same old circular logic. People like that, I mean, it's really just, well, whatever helps you sleep at night. It depends on the person. I've had really thoughtful discussions, and then I've had people to where you're just, you know, they're already drinking the Kool-Aid. There's nothing you're going to say.
I think on some level, though, I'd like to see us make it, enough of us making fun of, let me back up. I don't believe that all religions and all belief systems and all worldviews deserve respect. That's what I hear a lot. Can't we all just give each other respect? Well, if a guy walks in and he says he worships the color blue when he hears voices and, you know, quite frankly, you're a nice guy. Let's, you know, hang out. I don't have to respect your opinion just because you hold it. If it's ridiculous, somebody has to say something, don't they? Otherwise, wow, what a crazy circus this place would be. I would like to see it get to the point where someone posits a story about six-day creation and dinosaurs in the Garden of Eden and, you know, a 600-year-old guy piloting the ark and you know, God who curses fig trees and all of that stuff, levitation and the Walking Dead. And when those subjects come up, there is so much overt mockery like, oh, yeah, you got to be kidding me, that those who have been uncomfortable or maybe on the sidelines, it emboldens them because they're like, hey, I'm not the only one who thinks this stuff is a load of crap, you know?
Yeah. Well, wasn't it? It was Ben Franklin or someone who said that ridicule was the only reasonable way to respond. I can't. I'm going to butcher the quote if I try to say it. But
my chat room will find it. No, somebody will find it. Put it up.
Yeah, ridicule is the only tool to be used because ideas have to be fully formed in order for reason to enact upon them, and no one ever had a fully formed reason or a fully formed idea of the Trinity. It's something like that. But he was saying it, you know, hundreds of years ago. So yeah, sometimes you just got to mock him a little bit, you know. I try not to be that guy though. But I find
it's important, I think, to choose your battles. You know, if you jump in every time, you just come off like a douchebag. And honestly, I know a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people in the atheist community who, even when they're right, I just don't want to be around them. I mean, they're so antagonistic. They're so unpleasant. They're so angry. They're so venomous. They're always on the offense that, quite frankly, they just suffocate. They just pull the air out of the room. No thanks. You know, sometimes you got to breathe, man, you know.
Well, you know, a couple times I've had people actually come out and tell me, you know, well, for an atheist, you're like one of the nicest, most friendly, like you're the kindest. They expect an atheist to be like Ebenezer Scrooge. Mm-hmm. And I've had religious people actually tell me, you know, you're like the nicest evil guy I've ever met.
I'm seeing on our chat room wall, Thomas Jefferson, quote, ridicule is the only weapon which can be used against unintelligible propositions. I think I love our chat room.
You got to love it, an army of people with the Internet at their fingertips.
Thanks for the call, Brian, and happy Halloween, and you and the boy go have a good time, okay?
We will. Thank you.
Aaron Raw, when I spoke to him last year, and I'm hoping to do another podcast with him very soon, once Delahunty's wedding and everything's all over with. By the way, coming up later on this year, let me digress for just a second. We're going to do a frequently asked questions show because I get so much of the same stuff. I thought let's just do a show on it. People are asking, well, why this and why that and how do you do this and why does your website do that and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm compiling those. We're just going to do an FAQ show. We're going to do an Atheists in the Military show, which will fascinate me. If I had a dime for every time some religious chowderhead told me that there are no atheists in foxholes. And, of course, on the Thinking Atheist Facebook page alone, I see a lot of hardworking, patriotic servants of their countries, you know, people who've dedicated their lives to military service, who are like, well, that's not even close to accurate. Not only am I an atheist, but I know a great many atheists. And some people talk about, even being in life-threatening situations, and they didn't. jump on the God bandwagon. They were able to approach it reasonably, logically. We'll talk about that, and we'll give some airtime to people in the military who are atheists and the challenge that they have in such an overtly God-oriented culture, especially here in America. It's God and country, right? God and country. And we'll do that. Dan Barker is going to be doing part of a show with me to promote his website, The Clergy Project. He's been working with Daniel Dennett on a website and resource for pastors and ex-pastors who decided along the way that they no longer believe. Many of these people have been preaching for 20, 30 years. So here they are, they're in the pulpit, and they come to the point where they just can't buy it anymore. They can't do it anymore. Or maybe they don't want to do it, but they don't have any other life skills. They have a family, they have a mortgage, they have responsibilities. In a lousy economy, they don't know what to do. They're in conflict. Are they lying to people? But at the same time, if they quit their job, they have nothing, and they have a responsibility to take care of their loved ones, and it's this really convoluted thing. And so they put together a website called The Clergy Project. It's clergyproject.org if you want to check it out in advance. And we're going to talk to some people who were pastors and how they got out. We might even get a call from some people who are still behind the pulpit. They're welcome to call anonymously. And, of course, Dan Barker will be speaking about the Clergy Project. All that and a whole lot more here before the end of the year. So some very cool stuff is on the horizon. And I was going in a direction and completely lost my train of thought, which happens more and more often as I get older. If you would like to participate in the show, you can call the number at the top of the screen. Let's talk about tactics, being an antagonist, mocking, being a softy, being a spoonful of sugar guy. Honestly, I want to have the kind of show where people who are believers and non-believers would enjoy listening, people who feel like it's accessible even if they don't agree. And I will say that there's a real need for that. Nobody wants to be told right off the bat that they're ignorant, they're stupid, they're worthless, they're retarded, they're this, they're that, and yet just a browsing of any comments page on a religious and or an agnostic or atheist site, and it's just a war of words. It's non-stop vitriol. Boom, boom, boom. Nothing ever gets said. Everything gets shouted. Nobody's listening. It's an absolute waste of time, and it's monumentally counterproductive. I've got a Skype call on the switchboard. Who's this?
It's Jackson, actually.
Jackson, thank you for calling and not hanging up on me.
I just was going through the wrong mic input on my computer. I had to fix that real fast.
Jackson, you got an opinion on this show today?
Actually, I'm a college student at Iowa State, and I'm part of the Atheist Agnostic Society there, and we do this thing every Friday at basically from 11 to, whenever we decide to go away, is we put up a big sign that says Ask an Atheist, and we just stand out there and we just usually have, I'd say, a lot of really good conversations with people. It's sort of like we're very respectful, and usually depends on exactly, we sort of give what we get sort of thing with that. Also, like every Monday we have a giant discussion in which we invite religious people there, and then usually it's usually like the way I put it is we sort of want to be very tactful and respectful to them. It's basically you want to tell them that they're full of shit, but in a way that they thank you afterwards.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, but you're a good person. Well, you must have some people come in and after they speak to you say, I never thought of it that way before. That ever happened?
That's me personally. I'm definitely more of a aggressive type person. I'm very combative, apparently, according to a couple of my TAs.
Oh, well, all right, paint the picture for me. I mean, I walk up to you and I say, y'all, the Bible's true. The Bible's, Jesus is Lord. I mean, what do you do? What do you say? What's your tactic with me?
Basically, I'll usually just ask you, like, why do you think that, stuff like that. A lot of the other members will sort of like go like for a more intellectual approach, but I'm like one of the dumber kids in the atheist club, so I kind of have to go for the.
That's not, dude. Don't do that. I have a feeling that if you're as enlightened to be able to reject superstition, you've got more going for you than many, and you don't have to resort to to sheer volume to compensate for it. How big is your group?
I'd say at the discussions, we have a small room. Like, it's just basically like a several long tables filled with chairs, and we always need to get more chairs out and more tables for whenever people come by. It's usually because apparently they have some sort of thing at the school that you have to go to a club meeting that you usually wouldn't go to, so we get a lot of like believers that have to do that, so they come to the atheist thing. And usually, like, I think one time we had a what is religion's place in modern medicine, and how much credit should it take, to which I opened the floor with I believe that religion is I think religion likes to do none of the work and take all of the credit, and to that immediately the floodgates opened for all those people that usually don't come to our meetings, and it started into like a definitely big fight with not really like an intellectual fight. They're saying like, no, we don't think that, like we don't think that, like we still thank the doctor and stuff like that, and like they're saying like, well, we pray for, like, I think one of the examples they did was we pray over the hands of the surgeon so he does his best work, and so like definitely we try and debunk that and try and get them to say stuff like that. Also, like, I like how everyone always says like they're drinking the Kool-Aid. I don't understand that, because Kool-Aid is delicious, and I think Kool-Aid's getting a bad name because of that.
Well, you know where that comes from, don't you?
Yeah, from like all the cults and stuff.
It comes from the Jim Jones, where they put poison in the Kool-Aid. But I totally get you. Thanks for coming to the rescue of that particular brand. Thanks for the call, and have a wonderful Halloween holiday. Okay.
Yeah, you too.
Religion doesn't do the work, but it wants all the credit. Well, I mean, I've seen a lot of people who do a lot of work in the name of religion. Now, where we stand apart is that they give God the credit. But I mean, they'll go out and dig wells and build houses and feed hungry mouths, and travel around the world, put themselves often in positions where they are in danger, physical danger, to smuggle food and supplies and yes, Bibles, blah blah blah. But it's the same thing. It's like that quote from Christopher Hitchens: "What is an action that a believer could do that a non-believer could not also do?" And the truth is that there really is nothing. I mean, it's a human action. It's a human solution to a human problem. Just a few minutes from my conversation with Dave Silverman at American Atheist. 908. Hi, thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What is your name?
My name is Keith.
Keith, what do you have for us today?
Are you still talking about the tactics?
We're talking about tactics, antagonism, and atheism, and what do you think?
What I find that works phenomenally well is if you challenge anybody with where their Bible comes from. If you have any knowledge of how the Bible's canonized and where all the changes were and what wasn't in the original manuscripts versus what is. And what I do is I usually use the sympathetic approach. Like, I was raised Catholic, and then they start saying, well, what are you now? And then, well, I've been researching the Bible, so I'm not sure you want to hear my opinion on it. And they're instantly hooked. I have to say, I've talked to evangelical, everybody, and they just have no clue as to where the Bible comes from. Zero. And it's the most unique approach I've ever come across. And then, I just started talking because I'm kind of in the dating scenario or the dating scene. And when I come across and I go on dates with like random people, like some of them are religious, and they get on this topic. And I know religion and politics are supposed to stay away from, but when you can't really side with them, in order to kind of keep the peace, you sympathize with them.
You draw a circle around a great tactic that people often use when addressing something that is difficult. And that is, instead of starting with the word you essentially focus on the word I. And I do this a lot of times when we're dealing with conflict resolution. When you go in and instead of saying, you're wrong, or you did this, or you did that, you will say, I myself explored the scriptures, and I have found some interesting things that I could not reconcile, and I am, for that reason, an absolute atheist. Right. So what happens is because I've self-directed those comments, I've then opened the door where they don't feel accosted, and then their next question is going to be an atheist. Well, how did that happen? Now they've engaged me, right? So, I think that's a worthy tactic. You've had some success with it?
Unbelievable success. I mean, I've done a speech at my godson's baptism, and I didn't, I came out with the fact that I did a lot of research on the Bible, and I didn't go into, like, why am I religious or not. But I must have had 5 people from my family just come up to me and talk to me about that. Just were real interested to know what my opinion was after researching the Bible for 2 years. They just want to know, because I don't care who you ask, they don't know where the Bible comes from. They'll quote scriptures, they'll go crazy, they'll use all these apologetic tactics. They don't know where the Bible came from.
You must have heard Pastor Steve at the God discussion broadcast, because I'm sure he probably.
I want to listen to that, but I haven't heard it yet.
Don't bother. It'll make you crazy. But I'm telling you, you want to talk about a guy who quotes the Bible to prove the Bible. By the end of the 3 hours, I mean, I'm sure everybody was shouting at the radio. They're like, well, why is the Bible true? Well, the Bible is the Word of God. Well, why is the Bible the Word of God? Well, because it's true. Because it's infallible. Well, why is it infallible? Well, it's God's Word. Well, wait a minute. So I posted that classic photograph. It's a parody. I put it on the Facebook page, and it says, "This napkin is true." It had like an ink pen on the napkin. "This napkin is true. Why? It says so right here on the napkin." So now I believe. So, hey, I appreciate your call. There's some great stuff on the show. That's great advice. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Another tactic that I have found success with is instead of making statements at first, I only ask questions. When they come to me, instead of, if I see something that's remarkably stupid, then instead of saying, well, why did you just pay $40,000 for an intrusive medical procedure if God was doing the healing? Instead of saying, instead of walking in and going, that's ridiculous, the doctors did it, essentially I say, well, how much did that procedure cost? How long was the recovery? It was, 6-9 months? Oh, they're still recovering? What kind of medications are they on? Wow, how expensive is that? What's the prognosis? What, they're not going to be fully recovered? They're not really sure? That's interesting. So tell me, who do you credit for the success? Who do you credit for the healing here? it sounds to me like you guys made a significant financial investment, and there were many trained physicians who'd spent, decades doing this for a living. And so, I'm not accosting them directly. I'm just asking some legitimate questions, and now they're starting to react. I have had some success with that. Maybe you will as well. Time for a couple more. Area code 303. Thank you for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth, this is 303. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I sure can. What's going on?
Okay, this is Uncle Scott.
Uncle Scott.
And I thought I would just give something real. Arguing with Christians can be sometimes productive, sometimes, it's like beating your head against the wall.
Yeah.
On that. But several years ago on Usenet, I came up across something that really, I think, puts a good thing on Christianity in general. And I think one of the things about Christian in general today is it has this real Southern flavor to it. You were brought up, basically in the South, and from what I understand, Southern Baptist or something similar.
Yeah, I had one parent who came from a very conservative ex-Lutheran, then kind of a Baptist environment, and the other parent, believe it or not, was Pentecostal. So I got a taste of both.
Yeah, that's a good Lutheran Pentecostalist. Now that's talk about an oxymoron right there.
Woo, yeah.
Because I say, I was raised up in Minnesota, so I would be what you would call raised as a good northern Minnesota Lutheran, kind of a Garrison Keillor, Prairie Home Companion type outlook.
Yeah.
On life. But anyway, I just want to give you this thing from Usenet that I found years ago, and it was just a little blurb. And sometimes, you can go on and on about all kinds of stuff, but every once in a while you see somebody just compresses things down into, like they just nailed it in just a few sentences on that. And it has to do with Christian fundamentalism, and of course, how a lot of Christians tend to think. And, of course, when you look at, say, how I grew up versus how you grew up, they're kind of totally different. Southern Christianity is way different from good old practical Minnesota, Lutherans on that. But I'll just read you this real quick. It has to do with critical thinking, and it has to do with Southern Christianity is very authoritarian. I think you could probably agree to that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, on that. Well, it says is this. It's just two little sentences. Is that in Southern Christianity, critical thinking, I mean, this is from this little thing that was put up by, I think, a gentleman named Russell Turpin years ago. It says, critical thinking is expected in reverse proportion to a person's position in the chain of command or the chain of authority, and must never be held in contradiction to any power higher than that in the chain of command. And this, I think, is important to understand if you're arguing with Christians. And the other sentence is this: it's not easy to defeat errors in Christian fundamentalism because reason and evidence are subordinate to authority and feelings. And trying to argue reason and evidence with someone who is arguing from, I feel this or I feel that. Like, again, it's like, butting your head against a brick wall.
Bill Morgan, who was a speaker at the Oklahoma Free Thought Convention, was a former charismatic believer and a college professor at ORU, and he's always asked, well, how did you buy it? How did you not? You're an intelligent guy. I mean, you got a PhD, for Pete's sake. You're not an idiot. How in the world did you buy into this? And his response is, I think, relevant. He says, I turned off the rational part of my brain in relation to religion. I think people are willing to flip that switch off, because, quite frankly, when you start with the answer, right, you start with God, what motivation do you have to go any deeper?
Sure, and it's not just that. That's how you're taught to think from a young age, where I wasn't. Like I say, in some ways, I cannot understand this type of Southern evangelical Christianity because I wasn't raised that way. It's just like I look at them and go, say what? Huh?
You mentioned Garrison Keillor. I really enjoy. I love storytelling. I love storytellers.
And he's one of the best.
He's one of the single greatest storytellers ever. And of course, he's always talking about the Catholics and the Lutherans going up for it out there. They're always going after each other. That uneasy truce between two different doctrines. And
absolutely. Because I grew up in towns like that, and I heard this. I grew up in Minneapolis, but both my parents come from a small town up in northern Minnesota, where since both parents came up from the same town, I was up there in the summer and for Christmas and, all this good stuff up there. And, I remember, people saying, that Father John, he's a pretty good guy, but, he's got some strange ideas there, I'm not too sure about that, that kind of stuff.
That's exactly how it. My dad's from Minnesota, and it's like, the Lutherans up there, they do a lot of crazy stuff, and the Catholics, and those two really, it's like the Hatfields and the McCoys. It's brilliant.
It's like when I try and do a Southern accent, if I do it too long, I start going into that good old northern Minnesota brogue, and people are looking at me like, what are you talking about?
Now I got one more question for you, real fast. If you hear a story about Mike, the religious antagonist, and he takes Thunderfoot, and as a gag, they walk into a Home Depot to buy materials for a new crucifixion. Are they drawing a big, healthy circle around the insanity of the story, or are they putting everybody on the defensive to a degree that they give the rest of us a bad name? Do you have an opinion on those kind of tactics? Well,
like I say, one of the things especially about how Christianity is becoming, it's becoming in your face. You've got all this, from Pat Robertson to all this stuff. It really is in-your-face stuff. And sometimes the only tactics you can use is back in your face. And if done right, it can be extremely effective. If done wrong, like a lot of stuff, it can backfire on you.
Yeah.
And, you got to think a little bit about probably what your end result is going to be. And, basically, you got to get... You would never do that to a Minnesota Lutheran. But, you go down to a Southern Baptist who's getting in your face. That's what they understand. Get back in their face. It just depends on the situation.
Uncle Scott, thank you for a great call out of Minnesota, and I appreciate you listening and being part of the show. It's much appreciated, sir.
Thank you much. Bye-bye.
That's terrific stuff. All right, I had a chance to speak with Dave Silverman. He is the president of American Atheists, and he can speak to the issue of tax. Very big things lined up for the end of this year, and the beginning of 2012. And it's definitely a full calendar for you, huh?
We have several things going on right now. Most importantly is going to be the Reason Rally. It's going to be the largest secular gathering in world history. So the largest gathering of atheists anywhere ever on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. It's going to be a celebration of secular values, a celebration of all the progress we've made. It's not going to be a religion-bashing event. It's going to be a celebration. It's going to be an event that's put together by 15 or more national organizations. American Atheists is one of the co-sponsors, and Richard Dawkins is going to be there, Taslima Nasreen is going to be there, P.Z. Myers, James Randi, and Bad Religion is actually going to give a free concert at the Reason Rally. You know, Seth, a lot of people ask me, what can I do to help? What can I do to help the movement? And sometimes I don't have a good answer. Sometimes there's not actually something for everybody to do. But there is something for everybody to do for this, and that is to come to this rally. This is activism, tried and true. This is being seen on the National Mall. This is going to be on television. This is going to be fun. The website is reasonrally.org, reasonrally.org. You can charter a bus at the website. You can schedule your trip. You can get discounts on airfare. This is going to be a big deal, and we need everybody to come to the Reason Rally. Right after the Reason Rally, in the same location, in the same city, Washington, D.C., Sunday and Monday, we have the National Convention of American Atheists. The theme for this convention will be Come Out, Wherever You Are. Dawkins will be there, Taslima Nasreen will be there, and P.Z. Myers, as well as several former preachers, Greta Christina, Jamila Bey. We're going to have an Atheist Nexus socialization party. It's going to be a really fun, very compact national convention for American Atheists. That's going to be in Bethesda, Maryland, which is on the metro of Washington, D.C., and anybody can find out about that at atheists.org. February 17th and 18th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, we'll be having a regional convention starring James Randi. Mr. Deity, Brian Dalton will be there, and Graydon Square will be giving a performance. And before that, you should keep your eye on the news, because I will be appearing on the Mike Huckabee Show on November 12th to talk about the launch of our new billboard. And that billboard's going up on the #1 billboard in the country. It'll be at the foot of the Lincoln Tunnel, and it's going to be as poignant as the last ones. You may remember the last billboards that we put up got some attention on an international level, and this billboard's going to be almost as poignant, or maybe even more so, and maybe even push the envelope just a little bit more.
Are you getting some people who were pretty upset, a little bit of everything?
I'm getting a lot of everything, actually.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of hate. We're also getting a lot of love from the secular community. We're getting a substantial amount of what we were going for, which is you're saying what we're thinking, but we can't say, which is exactly what American Atheists does. We are the Marines of free thought. We fight the fights that nobody else wants to fight.
A great example is the cross at Ground Zero. Can you flesh it out for me? I mean, the first thing somebody's going to say is, what?
Right.
A cross at Ground Zero? People died there.
People died there, and you know, this is something that you get all the time. And if you just take a step back, you'll realize that they pull that every single time. They pull that every time there's a school shooting, and they push religion. Every time there's a bombing, and they push religion. Every time there's a tragedy, they push religion. And then when we resist, they come out with, no, not now. Don't do it now. People died here. Well, that's when religion tends to break the law. That's when Christians specifically tend to break the law in pushing their religion. When you look at the World Trade Center cross, we've got, first of all, the World Trade Center was built out of T-joints. They took one of the many, many T-joints that survived the tragedy. They straightened it. They repaired it. They carved Jesus into it, and they put it in front of a church for years. Then, this year, without warning, they installed it into the memorial, that's public land, with public money, in a religious service by a priest who sanctified the ground. And they actually created what is, in effect, a working shrine inside the 9/11 memorial. And they didn't allow any other organizations, any other religions to be in there because they said it was an artifact. Well, it's not an artifact. It's scrap metal. And we have to say that. We have to say, no. 400 to 500 atheists also died in 9/11, and a whole bunch of Muslims and a whole bunch of Jews, and they all died. And no, this is not a Christian-only event. How dare you try to make this a Christian-only event? How dare you try and put a 20-foot monument to your religion in this memorial to the exclusion of everyone else with public money, with public funds, in a religious service? How dare you do that to our country? Actually, it's not going to happen.
So you've got these politicians, though, who they wear God like another campaign platform. It's more about the polls, right? Whether they believe or not, they're not going to eschew God in front of millions of people. So how do they react? Are they acquiescing here? Are they sticking to their guns and saying this country was founded on God? You know,
well,
what kind of feedback you get?
We're certainly getting a lot of that from the religious right. There are several congressmen who are trying to pass a bill in Congress declaring that the cross is a national monument. So now we'll have a national religious shrine as a national monument if that passes. And all they're doing, all of this hyping and all of this hoopla that they're doing is all just because and I want to make sure that everybody understands this. It's not because they want to have the cross in the memorial. It's because they want to have the cross as a monopoly in the memorial. All we're demanding is equality. And because we are demanding, okay, if you're going to put the cross in there, you got to allow everybody in there. That's the law. Now, are you the kind of guys that go after the fire stations for the plastic baby Jesus, or do you guys just pick the bigger battles? Because, I being kind of a softie, am one of those dudes who, I'll drive by a fire station with a baby Jesus in front, and I'll just go, whatever. While some people, they call the attorney. We choose the clear battles, okay? If we're in a lawsuit, we intend to win. Now, it could be that, we certainly have filed complaints against exactly that, fire stations that put Jesus in front, or fire stations, in fact, there's one near my house that keeps putting crosses up on the fire station.
I get that. I do. It's just part of me thinks, is it a distraction, a waste of resources? Do you have to say, well, let's go to ground zero? And ignore some of the tertiary stuff.
No,
here
you don't want to set a precedent, and that's the problem with the smaller stuff. If you let it go, it sets a precedent. However, not everything needs to go to a lawsuit. Sometimes a letter will do. Sometimes it's actually unintentional. They just need to be informed that if they're going to do that, they have to allow everybody to do that. And then they have to make the choice: are we allowing everybody to do it, or are we making this a secular fire station or secular movement? And they get to make that choice. Nobody is saying you have to remove this. What we say, and this is all we say, is that you have to be fair. If you're going to allow the Christians a monument, you have to allow the atheists. And we have several atheist organizations, several smaller atheist organizations putting up displays over the winter solstice season because we get our equal access, because we get our equal time, and that's fair. Even though I personally don't want anything up there. I, David Silverman, do not want creches on public land at all, even if they're in the presence of a Happy Winter Solstice Love American Atheist sign. I want it clean, but that's not my choice. We can demand only what the law allows us, and we demand equality, and that's what the law allows us.
Dave Silverman, American Atheist. We got to talk about Rig Perry and his prayer rally in Texas. I'm sure you guys took a stand on that. What an amazing blurring between the lines of politics and government.
Now, that was an excellent example of a lawsuit we did not file because we knew we knew it would fail. Governor Perry has lawyers at his disposal, and he really treaded that thin line between, really pushed that envelope, but he really didn't cross it or he did cross it, but only in very, very small ways, like acknowledging the event and urging people to come from the governor's website. That was illegal. But him actually participating in the event was not illegal unless he was standing in front of the icon, which was illegal. So there was a lot of very, very mushy stuff there. American Atheists had a big protest for the event, and we made it very, very loud and clear that we disapproved, and we chose not to file that case because we expected to lose it. That's a very, very clear example of a politician using religion for his own political gain. Let's face some facts here. Rick Perry's a lousy governor. He's got the state of Texas, which is nearly last in education, nearly last in so many different in so many different measurements, that what he's doing is he's just praying so that the religious people will give him a bye. Yeah, he's a lousy governor, but he's Christian, so we'll let him go. And that's something that really the Christian community needs to fight against.
Politicians have been using God and Sunday church and the photo ops to make themselves more electable probably since politics began. I don't remember it being quite at this temperature ever. I've never seen in my mind over the past several years such an overt embracing of religion.
Well, you know what the purpose here of Rick Perry had a very specific purpose, okay? Rick Perry's purpose was to make Mitt Romney look moderate. That's his job. Rick Perry will never get elected president. He has obviously broken the law so many times as far as separation of church and state. He's not going to get elected president, and neither is Michelle Bachmann. They are both there in the Republican primary to make Mitt Romney the guy with the magic underwear, okay? To make him.
That's the first thing I think of every time I see the guy. I'm like, is he wearing them?
Of course he's wearing them. He
right?
believes his underwear is magic, and that, in my view, disqualifies anybody from being the most powerful man in the country.
Well, look, Dave, I'll make an admission that will probably increase the level of hate mail that I get tenfold.
Go for it.
It is not out of the realm of possibility someday in the future, some year, for me to vote for someone who lines up with me politically, someone who fiscally lines up with me, that maybe they're a successful business person, they do this, they do that. They are qualified in very tangible ways. And they pray over their Sunday dinners and go to Sunday church. As long as it's not an evangelical platform, if they practice it in their personal lives, I would consider them over someone who was an atheist who I thought was a horrible choice, horribly unqualified.
Well, you're probably not going to get that kind of a choice, though, are you?
No, I feel like a man without a country. I mean, I feel like I'm absolutely without choices.
Well, once we get an atheist politician of note, he's not going to be horribly underqualified. You can guarantee that whoever breaks through that glass ceiling is not going to be horribly underqualified. However, on the other side, just because somebody prays and goes to church doesn't make them a bad president. We can have good presidents that are religious. The question is whether or not they put the Constitution above the Bible.
Sure. Did God tell them to run? Did God appoint them to the presidency? Are they going to return us to be one nation under God?
Right.
Are you amazed every time you hear people say one nation under God about the incredible lack of education they have about the founding fathers of America? It must make you shake your head.
It does, and it's frankly our biggest problem as a country. Our education system is so poor that people do not think to read. People do not think to look up the Treaty of Tripoli. People look at their preachers and they believe what they say, and the school system doesn't teach them to think critically about what they hear. It teaches them to memorize and regurgitate. So when they hear something, they memorize it and they regurgitate it. And that's what One Nation Under God is. It's people memorizing this dogma, this false nationalistic dogma, and regurgitating it as if it were true. And they think it's true. And it's very discouraging to me when somebody says, we were reformed as a Christian nation because the Declaration of Independence says Creator in it. And the Constitution is signed in the year of our Lord. That is such a tremendously ignorant thing to say. But then when you look at One Nation Under God, and they come back and say, the Founding Fathers did that. or In God We Trust was done by George Washington back in the day. This is just wrong.
Yeah.
But
all right, well, let's speak about tactics then. So somebody says that, you're standing eye to eye, face to face. Do you go on offense and say, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard? Look, here's how you're wrong. Or is it more of a spoonful of sugar approach? I mean, how do you address it when it comes up?
When I address it, I actually ask the person what they would like me to do. Would you like me to convince you that you're wrong, or would you like me to just nod my head and let you believe a lie? I don't want you to think I'm some bad person. You've just said something that's factually incorrect. I can help you, or I can let it slide. What would you like me to do? And then
and they say what?
Come back and say, well, no, tell me. Go ahead, tell me. And then I'm open.
Are you positively received ever, or do people always push back?
Well, if you're talking about a pastor, there's two kinds of pastors. The pastors who tell what they think is the truth, and the pastors who knowingly tell a lie. The pastors who knowingly tell a lie don't challenge me. They are not interested in the truth. They already know the truth. They know they're spewing lies, and they don't want to be exposed. The pastors who think they're telling the truth, they will invite it. But normally the pastors are fine with it. It is the followers that are the dangerous types. It's the followers who can get really in your face. And then you just have to keep a very, very low tone in your voice. But I don't back down.
Is there a tactic that you have found that doesn't work and a tactic that really does, or is it just person by person? Or do you just assess personalities and backgrounds and cultures and just go point by point?
The tactic that I found, the one thing that I found really doesn't work is swearing. Swearing and getting anything vulgar.
You haven't seen my comments pages, because that's all it is. It's all caps, all swearing. You're an idiot. You're retarded. You're stupid. What are you doing? You're a primate, literally.
Yeah. Well, you are a primate, but saying,
sure.
But actual swearing, actually being vulgar. I'm from New Jersey, raised in Boston. I swear a lot and when I'm off, but when I'm in an argument, that's the piece of advice I can give. Never swear, even if your opponent is swearing, because it gives them something to talk about. It gives them something to hate about. And even if they're doing it themselves, I have found it to be quite unproductive. The only thing that's more unproductive than swearing is staying silent and saying nothing. Don't stay silent and say nothing. That's the least productive thing you can do.
David Silverman, American Atheist, and the Reason Rally. You can go to reasonrally.org for details. By the way, David just debated Dinesh D'Souza. David just debated Dinesh D'Souza, who has done debates with Dan Barker, and I think he debated Hitchens. Dinesh really frustrates me. Dinesh D'Souza was debating Dan Barker of Godless, who used to be an evangelist. And so the first thing he does is go after him and say, well, he's an embittered former preacher. Instead of debating and proving God, he was trying to disprove Dan Barker's and remove his credibility. And he's very, very frustrating. And I haven't seen the debate yet, but as I understand it, Dave Silverman did extremely well against Dinesh D'Souza. They do have that video, I think, at richarddawkins.net, or you can just find it on YouTube. And you may be just as frustrated with Dinesh, who seems like a nice guy. He seems like a really nice fella. You could probably hang with him for a little while. I've got some time left. I asked the chat room if we should just wrap it up and call it a day, or if we should continue on for another few minutes, and they're saying go for it. So if you're a glutton for punishment, let's go back to the switchboard and continue the conversation. Area code 850. Thank you so much for your patience. What's your name?
Hey, this is Sean from Pensacola, Florida.
Sean, thank you for calling, and thanks for your patience. Do you have an opinion on all this?
Yeah, I do. I put up on the chat room earlier, and some people asked why I support the Westboro Baptist Church and people like Harold Camping. And it's not for the reasons that I support what they're doing. I think that they're an absolute waste of space, but you have to admit that they do more for the atheist movement than we could possibly ever do by, number one, just bringing up the topic of, hey, this is actually in your book, and it allows people, it opens up the door to conversation because, like someone was saying earlier, they are really all talking out of the same book. You see what I'm saying?
It's like when you're in a debate and somebody's making a complete idiot out of themselves, the best move is quite often to just let them.
Right.
Give them enough rope to hang themselves. So you think it actually helps to draw a circle because they are using the foundational. I mean, the Bible speaks out against homosexuality. God burned whole cities for Sounds like Westboro's trying to call you, man. Do you need to get that?
Oh, I didn't know you could hear that.
That's the attorney. The attorney's trying to call in to give you a piece of his mind. So you just say let him go? So you think we should allow Westboro to protest wherever they wish?
Well, I don't think they should get the media attention that they do. My best friend is a Pentecostal, and his dad's a Pentecostal preacher, and I was curious what exact scripture they were getting their fuel from, and it all comes from the one scripture, for everything be thankful. I don't know which scripture that is, but that's the one.
Thessalonians 5:18. Yeah.
That's the one they're basing it off of. But it really, how else would you start a conversation with somebody unless you had some fundamentalist, doing this stuff where I forget who says it, but I really do believe daylight is the best exposure. And as far as antagonizing people, when he was having a wedding, my friend who's a Pentecostal, I was like, well, do you think I should get your wife a helmet for her wedding gift? Because, we're going to have to go stone her afterwards. You don't realize, right?
That's just so...
It's there.
And after you essentially called her a harlot, what happened then?
Well, then you have to point to, well, that's the Old Testament, that's the New Testament, and if she's talking in the background, I'm like, will you just tell her to 1 Timothy, be silent, be silent.
Woman, be silent, yeah. Great call. Thank you so much for listening to and being a part of the show today.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself. They taught us that in school, 1 Thessalonians 5:18, and everything give thanks, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. And honestly, it's an example of one of those cherry-picked things of the Bible where there is some good in it. Yeah, and everything, give thanks wherever you can anyway. Be thankful. Live a thankful life for the things that you do have. People who say, well, you can't have morality and good things without the Bible. The Bible says don't steal. The Bible says don't covet your neighbor's wife. The Bible says don't bear false witness. And of course, how original is that? Okay, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. That's not exactly groundbreaking material, And I think we could have figured it out without the writings of semi-literate Bronze Age peasants. I've got Conster on Skype on my switchboard. Can you hear me? Conster on Skype. Hi, we're on the Thinking
Atheist I got through. Yay! Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. What's up?
Right. As a British person, people are generally atheists. People understand evolution particularly well, so that's a particularly good thing. However, the thing is, and especially in South America, south of, United States, there is a particularly sort of lack of evolution understandings. Now, you see, the thing is, I'm going to go into tactics right here. You see, the thing is whether they understand evolution rather than they believe in it.
Are you living in the States now? I'm curious as to...
No, I'm just a completely British person.
Okay, so you are looking at the southern states in the United States from across the ocean.
Yeah.
And your perception is that they believe in it without understanding it? Did I get that right?
No, I'm saying what they believe. They think what evolution is wrong based on their misunderstanding of it. And now I'm nicking this completely from Reddit, but if you ask them whether they understand evolution, rather than if you believe in it, they'll be saying, "Oh yes, they understand it." And when you can ask them what they believe, what they actually believe evolution actually is, and when you can actually correct them, so they can understand what evolution actually is, because most, Christians in America particularly tend to believe what evolution is creating out of nothing.
Yeah, honestly, most people, here's what I get when I bring up evolution, and they obviously do not understand it. Their first is a knee-jerk reaction. You think we just came from nothing? You think we just crawled out of the soup? You think you think my grandfather's a monkey? You think this? It's very defensive. It's very kindergarten. The responses are obviously they have not been well versed. They talk about the ladder of evolution, and the truth is that tells you right there they have no idea anything about speciation and branching, because evolution really is a tree with all these multiple branches on it, and it is observable. It is verifiable.
I mean, if you watch stuff like Cosmos, which is one of my favorite documentaries of all time, I mean, it will completely understand, it will completely for you and all that sort of stuff. And I recommend, if anyone doesn't have Cosmos, I recommend they buy it. But as I agree with you exactly there, and they think, well, it's about cosmosogenesis and it's a biogenesis, and it's not what it actually is explaining the diversity of life.
I think, too, it's the onus is on us to make sure that we have the resources at our disposal if we're going to have somebody accost us with a question or a challenge to evolution. I always like to point people to the video lecture. It's 90 minutes long by Donald Prothero called Evolution, Why It's True and Why It Matters. Anyway, you can link to it on my YouTube page, and it's really geeky and really wordy. But, I mean, he brings up and shows you slide by slide evidence of transitional fossils and evidence of evolved creatures and evidence. I think he addresses the eye, the human eye, and all the things, the hackneyed things that we hear so often in debate. He brings them up. And it's important for us to at least have a tertiary knowledge of evolution, what it is, how it works, and why, and then be able to sort of get them interacting with the experts, with the evolutionary biologists who can then, sort of take it in for a touchdown, So I agree totally. That all you have for me?
I completely just trying to think of what I'm supposed to say, because I'm just, you see, I'm just going to explain how things are in Britain compared with America. In Britain, everything's just science education in Britain, I would probably think, is a lot more better than science education in America. Because, the thing about British politics is there's a massive separation of church and state. It's more official. Not exactly official, but it's just people understand what there's a evolution, separation of church and state more than Americans, even though we have it in our constitution, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And because for hundreds of years, upon thousands really, the Europe particularly has understood the effects of lack of separation of church and state, especially with Crusades and, of course, the Renaissance.
I look forward to the day when we are more like Europe in the fact that it is odd for someone to espouse or promote religion. For you to walk up and say, really, where do you go to church? As I understand it, that doesn't really happen over there. I mean, religion's sort of a non-issue, and those who do go out, if someone was to start spouting Bible speak on the street corner, they would be seen as an annoyance and quite possibly out of their mind. So do I see that happening in America in the next few decades? Not so much. Do I think religion will ever go away? Absolutely not. But I would like to see the culture turn over the next 50 years, and it may take less time, more time, I don't know. But imagine if it was one of those things where when you did go out and you wore your T-shirt with the Jesus fish on it and you tried to interject God into the political system and all of that you were seen as the anomaly. You were seen as the one who was doing it wrong. I look forward to a day like that. Area code 931. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's your name?
Hey, it's Steve.
All right, what do you have for me?
I was just going to say, just briefly, one thing I've learned is know your material. Be friendly if you're confronted with somebody. But be confident. Don't shrink. Had a Jehovah's Witness call me a couple weeks ago. We had a great discussion, and I noticed that he sort of wilted before I did. And
did he get frustrated though? I mean, did you feel his temperature going up? And
yes.
Because quite frankly,
the calmer I was, the madder he got, and he eventually, it basically ended with me trying to get him to hang around a little longer. And so I don't know if that did any good. I don't know if that...
he was done with you, Steve. He was done evangelizing you and ready to get out of there.
Well, that's just it. I mean, he just kept on. It basically boiled down to... he was like, well, think about the sacrifice Jesus made for you. And I was just calmly like, well, how was that a sacrifice, how was what Jesus did a sacrifice? He died temporarily, but then he got to go live in paradise as a God, eternally being adored by millions. That's still sacrifice. And that, a little humor, a little jabbing at him, but he couldn't respond to that. So just be confident, but it's counterproductive to mock people and go after people too hard.
I think too, people sometimes misunderstand. They mistake volume with strength. I think you should be able to walk into a situation and have a very even tone, a very confident body language to be able to speak maturely and just be able to say it. And you can even if there are raised voices, even if you become passionate, but at the same time you are always in control. You never appear that you're slipping, that you're knee-jerking, that you're impulsive. And what I have found is quite often the more level-headed that I am and the more even-tempered and even-voiced I am, giving specific factual information that can be checked and verified, the more I find that the antagonist, the person who is then defending religion, they're the ones that are frothing at the mouth, and they're the ones that they're yelling and they're starting to vibrate and they're starting to interrupt. And quite frankly, once again, you build credibility. You're never going to convince them, but you build credibility to anybody watching because they're the ones that look like they are not in control.
That's what you're after. You're after the person sitting on the fence observing. That person will come to you later and say, you really knew your stuff there. I've always had my doubts about religion or whatever, and then you can have a conversation with that person.
You wonder if Jehovah's Witnesses really enjoy Halloween because they got the door knocking thing down, man. They do it all year.
I got to tell you, I've had several friends who were Jehovah's Witnesses, and man, to a person, they went wild as soon as they got grown.
Yeah.
And if I was to talk to a young Jehovah's Witness, if I could get away from, I wouldn't want to. I don't know. It's not my place to try to pull somebody away from their religion when they're still a child. But a younger Jehovah's Witness, I would say to them, if I had one piece of advice, when you get grown and you can leave your parents' house, temper the alcohol a little bit. Don't go completely the other way. I've seen too much of that. But anyway, yeah. And the other thing I would say is look the person in the eye. The old basic, take off your sunglasses, sit calmly, hands folded, look them in the eye, nod, actively listen to what they have to say, and then very confidently just say, I understand what you're saying. I used to believe the same thing. Now, here's why I stopped believing it. And like I said, you may never convince the religious person, but the one observing, the audience you have, because you will draw an audience. Eventually, somebody sitting on the fence might come to you later, like I said, and say, hey, you nailed it. I feel exactly like you do.
I just don't think I could have a Jehovah's Witness in my home. I mean, once they're in that door.
I'm telling you, they're not
once they're
bad.
in my home, then you got to get
I guess because I live within a couple of miles of one of their churches, and I've dealt with them my entire life, they just don't bother me. They're like the Amish, man. They're part of living around here.
They're just an everyday kind of deal. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, I've worked with them. I'm good friends with several of them, several former members of it. They just don't bother me. And the thing that does bother me is they don't come see me anymore. And I think I'm on some sort of a list.
You got a reputation. They've actually probably got a map somewhere.
Hey, if any Jehovah's Witness in this part of Tennessee is listening, please come see me again. I miss you guys.
Go knock on his door for Halloween. You have a great holiday.
Maybe I'll start showing up at their house, yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Take care of yourself, brother.
All right, take care, buddy.
It's back to very quickly the subject of Halloween. Rita Rudner, I think, was the one who had the joke that said that she was so confused. She was raised by her parents never to talk to strangers or accept anything from strangers, but then they, on Halloween, send them out to door to strangers' houses to ask for candy. So now, as a result, she goes out, knocks on the door. When somebody answers with candy, she goes, "No, thanks." Just a great bit about what parents do to their children on this evil, wicked holiday. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Mike Lee, the religious antagonist. I want to thank Dave Silverman, the American Atheist. Thanks to our audience, everybody in the chat room for today's show. And again, we've got some very cool stuff lined up for the end of 2011 and getting ready for the kickoff of 2012. Thanks for being a part of the community here. And as we move forward, minds are changing, and that's what it's all about. And if you're having that debate, having an argument, having some sort of a spirited discussion with someone about religion, and you feel like you're getting nowhere, just remember that it's not necessarily about who's in front of you eye to eye, but about who's in the periphery, who's watching, who's listening, who might be asking those questions themselves. And the best of luck as we attempt to change some minds out there. Have a great week and a great holiday. See you next time.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. TheThinkingAtheist.com.